So then, in the epoch between 6,000 to 4,000 BC, the Pottery Neolithic, which evolves into the so-called Chalcolithic, named after copper. Copper becomes the first metal, one of the first metals that are worked here, along with tin. At this time, about 4,000 BC, copper and tin are being worked. These resources, though, have to be brought down from the north, from the mountains, and the Halafians have all of these resources. And the Samarans give way to the Abadians, who set up some of the first cities along the Persian Gulf. And the city of Uruk, which is located north of Eridu, becomes one of the world's first city. It's a twin city with the city of Ur. Ur is the city of the moon god Nanasin. Uruk is the solar city, both of Inanna and also of the cosmic god On. But it's also the city from which Gilgamesh will come later, and Gilgamesh comes from a solar dynasty. So Uruk is a sun city, Ur is a moon city, but Uruk now becomes the major city of this period. About 3,500 BC, it's at Uruk that all kinds of technological transformations are taking place. Now, what I believe to have happened was that the Halafians had to be conquered by the Ubaidians. They knew all the resources were in the north, all the minerals, all the minerals, all the gems, the precious stones, the wood. They went up to the north, they conquered and digested the Halafian culture zone in eastern Turkey up in the mountainous worlds, and then they put these things on rafts and sent them back down the rivers, and then about 3,500 BC we start getting all of these precious gems and minerals and metals are transformed into culture. We get the so-called famous cylinder seals of the Sumerians at this time, which are all made out of precious gems, and they're worn around the neck as a necklace as a kind of means of a personal signature to sign a document by simply rolling your precious gem across it with an inscribed mythological image that presses onto the clay an image. And at about the same time, we get the invention of writing, where the first books are river clay that have been dug up, and we have the stylus and the impression on it of cuneiform, which originated as pictograms that were drawn first, but these were too difficult to draw without smudging them with your hand, so they shifted into a wedge-style cuneiform. Cuneus means wedge. That came along shortly after this. And so 3,500 BC, then we start getting the first monumental architecture. The temples start coming to being. The White Temple at the city of Uruk is one of the world's hugest temples at this time. They get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we get the appearance of the first columns. We get huge 3-meter round columns that appear at this time with zigzag designs on them, probably symbolic of the watery abyss, the god Enki, the Poseidon/Mercury god of this pantheon. And now the cult of the ancestors has fallen away. The ancestors are always conservative, and when a society is bound to the cult of the ancestors, the answer that the ancestors always have to any question you give them about introducing a new technology or a new practice or a new technique is an emphatic no. The ancestors guard the past and they prevent change from taking place. But now with all these new technologies coming into being down on the alluvial plain between the two rivers that gave birth to the rise of the first high civilization in Mesopotamia about 3,500 BC, clearly the ancestor cult has disappeared. It's gone. The skulls are not being revered and worshipped anymore. Instead, what has taken their place now is a pantheon of deities: Enki, Ea, Enlil, the air god of the north, Inanna, the goddess of Venus, the morning star, who's also the patron goddess of astronomy. All these new gods come into being, Nanasin, the moon god, and each one of them is the patron of a specific craft or technology. So whereas the earlier cult of the ancestral dead would have forbidden new technologies, now we get new technologies specifically assigned to specific deities. Inanna is the patron goddess of astronomy. Nanasin, the god of the crescent moon, like a boat in the night sky, is the god of boat making. Enki is one of the gods of irrigation, one of the patron gods of irrigation. Enlil is the god who invented the hoe, while his son Ninurta is the god who invented the plow, and so on. And so we get all of this coming into being now, and we have high civilization rising and emerging 3,500 BC, with Uruk now setting up itself basically as the first imperial colony. We get Urukian pottery extending and Urukian technologies extending all the way up north along the rivers, all the way up into Turkey. And we find outposts that are established. They're basically outposts of the city of Uruk. A great colonial period was going on here, in which Uruk unified the entire country into what looks like the first trading empire. And they may have gone also to Egypt. And in going to Egypt, introduced writing to the Egyptians, introduced certain art motifs, introduced the concept of the cylinder seal, introduced the concept of, or the art motif of the twin serpents entwining with each other. All of these things that indicate that civilization was directly diffused from Mesopotamia to Egypt, which gets civilization about 600 years later, about 2900 BC, with Narmer as the great figure there who unifies the northern Egypt and southern Egypt and creates the first great civilization there in Egypt, based on principles that have clearly been diffused from Mesopotamia. You can find all this in Henri Frankfort's wonderful books. The Birth of Civilization in the Near East is one of them. That's still a classic, as well as his book Kingship and the Gods. And so this is the picture that we get here that Jaspers doesn't talk about in this chapter on prehistory. Allude to some of this material in the next chapter, but his prehistory chapter is pretty dull and pretty staid and outdated stuff. And so I wanted to fill it in here with fresh archaeological knowledge and data to update the picture so that we have a clear idea of what happened here. So civilization comes into being as the result of the collision of at least two cultures, the Halafians and the Samarran/Ubaidians, who become the Proto-Sumerians, who collide with them, and we get the birth out of these cultural collisions. And of course, we get the first Semites coming in with the Akkadians, who were there also from the beginning, who are clearly and ethnically very distinct people from the Sumerians, very different people. So we have these different cultures coming into being, and out of all of this cultural diversity, this ethnic diversity, we begin to get the first high civilization. So we'll leave it there for this chapter in Jaspers.